Hi, again, my name's Craig Nakken, and what we started to talk about last time and finished up with was about how the addictive process uses the channels of intimacy between different members to spread the illness of addiction from one person to the other until it gets to a point where people are lost and people don't have a relationship that works for them anymore. We talked a little bit about how to get some of that back. And we're going to talk much more about that now. I left the last slide up from last time because I want to use this kind of a springboard to talk about recovery. And to look at it, these are the types of things that get lost to the addictive process, like we were saying. The care gets destroyed in the family. People don't feel responsible for each other. They're not respecting and acting with respect towards each other. And there's a way where they have little knowledge of what's going on. You could look at how the denial is one of the ways that affect this. So what we're going to talk about is how do families get this back? How do individuals start to get this back? And so that's one of the things that we'll talk about during this time. What I want us to think of, this is a typical course for the typical alcoholic family. The first is what you have to do is define and see and kind of diagnose the alcoholism or the addiction and label it as a family problem. Not just an individual problem, but a family problem, so that you try to collect that we again, so you can put the we kind of in a basket so that you can work with it in that way and start to get everybody invested in the recovery process, instead of having some people invested and others not. And if people can see that it's a family problem, that what we can do then is kind of create that we. The second part is what you have to do is remove the alcohol or drugs from the family system. That's a necessity in that sense. You can't have recovery happen without removing that. It would be like trying to get somebody well who has cancer without taking the tumor out. You have to take the tumor out so that what happens is recovery can take place. Sometimes that's what our programs are, is helping to remove that tumor, remove the drug or alcohol, so then we can then start the recovery process. One of the hard things for the families is the next phase of recovery is what we call the emotional desert, in a sense that there's a lot of pain that people have to go through. There's a disconnect of not knowing what to do with each other as they create a new relationship. Like we talked about, you have to keep that new agreement, you have to set that new agreement up, and there's a lostness, there's a pain, there's a distance that you feel with each other that you're going to have to slowly start to shorten up that distance. But that's going to take time, and that's one of the hard things. Because lots of times we're dealing with people who are impulsive. The illness has made them impulsive. They want things right away. They want that. So they see a little break, a little bit break in it, a little bit of closeness, and they run to each other, scare each other off, and then they back off in that sense. So it keeps creating this distance that has to slowly be shortened up in those ways. And the last one we talk about is there's a family restabilization and family reorganization. And it's about what I was saying, that it has to be paced in that way. That what we do is we make some changes, and then those changes must be stabilized because they feel very rocky at that time. It's almost like standing on Jell-O. It feels very shaky, and you have to wait till that hardens, and then we make some more changes and we get closer and closer. So it takes time. And we know that for families to recover, it usually takes a couple of years for that process to take place of getting the old relationship back, or actually, more honestly put, is recreating a new relationship because the other one was lost to the addiction. But this one will have some of the new skills involved in it, in new ways to get close. Here's some of the changes that must take place when working with the addictive family, what we're trying to do, the types of changes that we're creating. The first one is we're trying to move from a power-based, remember that drive for power that we talked of, we're trying to move from that and get people back up to that drive for meaning. So that what they can do is operate from spiritual principles and create a value system, a workable value system that will then take them to a new world and create intimacy and do that creative love that we talked about. Again, we want them to go from a powerless to a powerful system. People get sober by ethical power. When they put a value system into place, that creates the power to stay sober. Okay. Otherwise, addicts can do it for a while with willpower. Addicts have a lot of willpower, but it doesn't work against illness. You know, if you had a friend who said that they had cancer and they were going to use willpower to cure that, you know they're not going to make it. Okay. And it's the same with addiction. If you say, I've got addiction, I'm going to use willpower to cure it, you know it's not going to make it. So what you've got to do is find and recreate a base again, and that base has to be in principles and spiritual principles. Create a value system that will then create the power to help everybody be able to heal. So in a sense, we have to grow the plant that we can take the medicine from, that we can use then to heal the wounds that are inside of us in our heart and soul. What we have to do too is go from an unstable to a stable system. That's again part of why we use and work with spiritual principles. If you look at it this way, as human beings, we're involved in time, and time means that we're going to fluctuate. In a typical day, we'll go through all different types of moods. Maybe one time we're very excited and then we feel sad, or maybe we feel angry, so we're always in a flux with our emotions. And if you look at it, if you look at spiritual principles are timeless. Respect, dignity solved problems 3,000 years ago and will solve problems 3,000 years from now. So they're timeless. They have a different relationship with time if we look at it that way. So we can see this aspect. And usually what we do is we use our value system as this middle. So maybe we kind of start to go up and we feel too good. Maybe we start to kind of get a little arrogance or some of that type of stuff. And our values say, wait a second, maybe we're up in our drive for power too much, and it starts to pull us back down. Okay? Maybe we start to go down and we feel a little sad, or we feel kind of depressed or something. And then hope kicks in and says, hey, this is just the way it is today. That's part of life. We all have some pain. And you hit that bottom and you come back up. Well, if you notice, one of the things that happens with addiction, it's an illness that disconnects you from your values, because addicts and their families are regularly betraying their value system. So in a sense, we lose this connection here. This gets erased, and we start to do is fluctuate quite a bit. And what the addict tries to do is control this fluctuation by using chemicals. So maybe if they're feeling down, they might take something to get themselves up, or if they're feeling too up, they'll take something to get down, and this starts to go wild in this way. So it's an up and down type of thing, and it's getting deeper, and it's kind of scary in that time for everybody, because the family reacts to each one of these types of things. And after some time, they have to just disconnect from the person because it's too painful to be on this type of roller coaster. And what we do in recovery is bring back this relationship with values. And in that sense, when we effectively do that, over time, we use these values to reorientate ourselves and to get back to a natural rhythm. There's a woman that I listened to the other day, and she said, the pace of nature, or the rhythm of nature, is slow to medium. Nature only moves fast when there's danger. And I really like that in a sense, because usually the pace of us when we're doing well is slow to medium. Okay? But when there's danger, is we get going faster and faster, that fear, that anxiety, those types of things. And that's the way it feels for a lot of people in an addictive family. It feels very fast and dangerous in that way. And part of what we do in recovery is work to slow that process down. And we do it by connecting with spiritual principles. The other that we move to is that we're talking about is we move from an object-centered to people-centered. Notice addicts, their primary relationship is with an object which has no soul. So when you do that, it affects you in some drastic ways. So what we do is move back to having relationships with people again, and that way we start to take care of each other, and I'll take care of your soul and you'll take care of mine. Okay? It's a much different type of world. But to do that means a lot of change. And change is always a crisis in self-esteem. And that's one of the things we have to deal with. That change is scary for us, those types of things. And the other, working with the families, you need to look at, in a sense, what we are is we're working to destroy the family the way it is. Remember that slide that I showed in the first one where it created this circle that was centered around the addiction. Now, what we have to do is break that and send people up that other way in that sense. So families get that. and they kind of know, geez, I know how to survive this way. I don't know if I can survive in the other way. So what happens in that way is there's a fear and anxiety, you know. We can fight and we do that, we're kind of used to the fighting, but I don't know if I can care about you. I don't know if I can pull it off. And usually our self-esteem is so low, it's been beaten up so much by that illness that we don't know if we're people who are capable of caring enough to heal this, okay? It's an issue of faith and trust again. Do we trust in ourselves? Do we trust in the recovery process enough just to do the work and let the outcome go in that way? Scary time. What I want us to think of in this way, because so much of the addict and the family's identity becomes wrapped up in the addiction, okay? The addictive process. When we enter into recovery, it's going to create a huge anxiety, okay? It's a whole new thing. It would be if I said to you, have I got a deal for you? What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick you up, take you and put you on a plane. You get to take a little small suitcase with you, and I'm going to take you to another world, and I'm going to drop you off, and you're going to live there the rest of your life, okay? That would be kind of a terrifying thing, but that's what we're asking. Addicts are usually comfortable in the world of addiction. They're not comfortable in the world of recovery, and usually the world of recovery represents shame to them because they don't feel like they fit in there. So it's a way of kind of doing that in reverse. So it's a very scary time. So what we're talking about that the individual and the family needs at this time is they need structure. They need structure. Addiction is very structured in that sense. It takes over your life. So either you're working to get high or you're recovering from a high. And that's pretty much your life. And the same with the family. They're either adjusting to and wondering if you're going to get high or dealing with you when you are high or kind of getting scared again over what happened during your addiction and that type of thing. So that's why we push people to stay attached to recovery programs for a period of 2, 3, 4 years in a very close way so that they can rebuild a structure inside of themselves. It takes a while to, one, incorporate those values into who we are, and then not just incorporate them, but put them into behaviors and learn how to act in that way. It's one thing to think about respect, but another is to incorporate respect into your heart, and then the next thing is to take respect and turn it into behaviors in a lifestyle. So that's the kind of the shift that we're working on, and that takes time. Back to this thing, remember I told you I was going to haunt you with this, okay? We're back there. And what I want you to see, all we're talking about with recovery is that what we do is we break a channel. We break a channel through the illness. We work to keep that channel open. And in so doing, we can take our energies again from here. We can take these energies attached to our values, our humanity, and we get that ethical power and ethical pleasure to stay sober. It's said in the 12 steps, the 12th step, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, okay? And the steps are basically a set of principles, spiritual principles. So having had a spiritual awakening as a result of our value system, what we are able to do is cause a transformation and re-enter the human world in a way where we feel respectful and dignified. Okay? We get that ethical power and ethical pleasure back. What I want us to think of, what we're trying to do is create a transformation process. And what we do is we take the pain and we take the addictive energy, the powerlessness that people have, and we ask them to detach from it. And you have to get that addicts become comfortable with pain. You know it. You may not like it. We don't like it. It doesn't say we like it, but we're comfortable with it. We know how to do that. And we have to detach from that and use those energies to cause the transformation. Okay? And when we do that, what we do that by taking these principles, turning them into action, and from that we create new relationships, new behaviors, new perspectives, ethical power, and that love. So we're in the process of creating love again, not feeding off of people's love. I want us to think of this. I want to talk for a couple of minutes about pain. Because pain is an important element to understand. We work with pain. When you're in a treatment center, they're always kind of pushing you. How do you feel? How do you feel? How do you feel? And we're going after that type of stuff because of what's embedded in the pain. okay, then I want you to look at why do addicts hurt? Why do their families hurt so much? If you look at it, addiction is a process of betrayal. We betray our values, we betray those we love, we betray those types of things, and when we do that, if we have a conscience, if we have a heart, what's created is pain. So the act of us betraying our humanity creates that pain. Okay? It's our way of keeping our humanity alive. So it's the fact that we hurt, but what happens to addicts is what they do then is they go get high over it. That becomes a trigger to go use. So the pain that gets created, which is a good thing, then becomes a trigger to use. Or the family members experience the pain and they get busy trying to fix this or get some help or do types of things. And then they meet with that addiction and the fight goes on like we talked of. So you can see that the pain becomes a servant in many ways of the addiction. Just to think of that. And in treatment, what we're trying to do is take this pain here and send it a different way, send it back to our humanity. Okay? Use it to get us back to, and to see in many ways that lots of times the things we did, we feel so bad about them because it's good to feel bad about them and that we were decent people all along. It's just that we did things that we couldn't even stand. I'll give example of this transformation process the best way I can. I used to work at a treatment center called Family Renewal Center, where what we did was our unit, who we treated was the whole family. So everybody from age 6 up who lived in the house came and was treated. And we worked with that whole thing. And as a counselor, you'd work with 4 or 5 families, and this is back kind of in the hippie days, so we'd all be laying on pillows in a room and all of that type of stuff. It was just a wonderful time. And I remember one night, this little girl, she was about 8 years old, she said to her dad, who was an alcoholic, she says, "Dad, I'd like to talk about my birthday party." And as soon as she said my birthday party, he just started crying uncontrollably for about 10 minutes, and everybody's kind of worried what's happening and so on. And after about 10 minutes, he gets it together and he says, "Do you mind if I tell him what happened?" And she says, "No, go ahead." And what happens is, he said, here's what happened, is last year was her birthday party. Her first birthday party that was going to be hers. We had friends coming, we had her friends coming, we had relatives coming, and it was just going to be her time. It was going to be just for her. What happened is I stopped at the bar to have a drink or two just to kind of get prepared for this, and I ended up getting drunk and I never came home. Okay? So I show up at about 11:30. He says, missing the party wasn't the worst thing I did. But around 11:30, 12 o'clock, I show up, and there's one person waiting for me. And you know who that is. It's his little daughter over there in the corner. Because she's worried. She's going, something had to happen to my dad. Something horrible must happen. He must have been in a car accident or something like that in order for him to miss this important event for me. And the guy walks in the door, and all of a sudden, that shame just comes rushing up inside of him, and he doesn't know what to do, and he gets scared. And what he does is he turns to his addiction for help, okay? And he said, I looked her in the eye and I said, I'll tell you exactly why. I'll tell you exactly why I missed your party. It's because you've been acting like a little creep lately. And if you don't behave next to your party, you're never going to see another party in your life where it's going to be worse than this one was. And she's just kind of there in shock, and we're crying, he's crying, everybody's crying. And the addicts are kind of saying, no, that's just your addiction and that. And what we're telling him is, no, tell us in more detail what happened. Tell us what it was like. Tell us about that moment. It's clear, it's etched in your mind. And he said it was horrible. He said, I was watching her, she was biting her lip. She, was quivering in that, and she was biting it because she didn't want to show anything to me. Her tears were welling up in her eye, but she was not going to let them fall down. And what I knew and she knew at that moment is that she had to kill off any relationship with her father to survive in this family. I knew it and she knew it, okay? But the part I want you to get is he's talking about it, and with the more detail that he's talking about it, who starts to smile? Okay? His daughter starts to smile. And if you notice, she's starting to smile because she's watching her father become a father again. Okay? She's realizing that inside of her was the identical pain that was inside of him. that this was an event that was both of theirs, and he heard about it as bad as she did, where she thought he never cared, okay? And it was only through that pain that they could see that they had an identical experience, that they could now form a bridge and walk over and meet with each other. So in a sense, I want you to think of that. That's why we deal with pain, not because it's some kind of just something we like to do, but because embedded within those pain is the values that we betrayed. And it's only by talking about them and experiencing that pain that what we're allowed to do is take that energy and use it for the transformation process. So, and we need that energy to get us there and to see, you know what, I wasn't a bad dad. I had an illness that had me betray my family, and I heard about it. Okay. Does that make sense to folks? Okay. Just to get that shift. So the pain is a very important aspect of recovery. This is ways that we heal an intimate relationship. I won't kind of go all over them, but I want you to think of a few of these. The first one is a genuine omission of one's own negative acts against relationships. So we have to start with that honesty. And the key word here is genuine. The genuine means that there's emotions attached to it, that we risk that vulnerability again that we talked of by saying, you know what, I feel bad about what I did, which is tied to the second one, that genuine remorse. So that you feel, and you not just feel it inside, but you risk sharing it with the other one so you can see if they have the same thing and if there's that bridge that you can walk across to each other. Old patterns have to be transformed. We have to step into a new life. We have to be willing to let go of the ego, the old self, and become willing to become something that we don't even know. Okay. We have to commit to these patterns of resolution. We have to become solution-focused instead of blame. Blame serves that drive for power in that sense. It comes from there. That's the function of blame, is to get back to that right or wrong, and that way stay in that drive for power. Meaning doesn't care about who's to blame. What meaning cares about is a solution. How do we achieve relationship? How do I work for you? How do you work for me? How do we help each other? That's all it cares about. Willingness to forgive. You know, and that's hard for some of the family members at times, because lots of times people go to treatment and they see what's going on and they come back and say, you know what, I was wrong, I'm sorry. I can see how I hurt you. And in that sense, they get a couple of truckloads of power, you know. You bet you were wrong. Okay, let's sit and talk about how wrong you were, okay? And it's like they've got the stage in that sense, so now they have that power. And then what we ask them to do is, oh, and we want you to forgive. You know, I've been down here all the time. Finally, I get up here, and you want me to forgive. You know, you got 5 years? Okay, you know, I'm giving you the benefit of doubt. You were using for 15. I divide it by 3, okay? But a relationship couldn't stand 5 years of that type of stuff anymore. So the forgiveness asks that what we do is realize that the past can't be changed, and that we'll work with this immediate part and work to create a future. The other part is we have to commit to principles that serve the relationship rather than the individuals. That what we do is create and live by principles, again, to get the ego out of the way, to get us out of those drives for pleasure and for power, and get us up to the drive for meaning, because that's where our values and principles live. And the other is setting some type of limitation that love only can do so much. That's one of the things where the family gets hurt so much, because they believe that love could fix this, okay? Love doesn't fix illness. You know, it doesn't fix heart disease, it doesn't fix cancer, it doesn't fix chemical dependency. What you have to do is take the treatment for it, and then you can start to create love again in that sense, and use love to heal the wounds, or use it in the recovery process as we talk about. Okay, spiritual principles, why do we use them? First is their centering devices, like we talked about here, is they remind us of that center is when we start to get to the extremes. It brings us back to our place where we learn how to be. Okay? The second part is their transformative mechanisms, that what they can do is transform us and take us from who we are today and turn us into a better person. So they can push us that way. They tell us, you're good, you're good, you're good, and what I want you to have more gifts in life. I want you to get more out of life. So they keep pushing us for more. They're also protective devices. They work to protect us from our own egos, so that our own egos don't get more important. They keep telling us, wait, you're not that important. What's important here is respect, dignity, honor, those types of things. Spiritual principles are to what we're to become. We're not just supposed to operate them, but what we do is we work to become them, okay? So you take somebody who maybe doesn't know how to be respectful or doesn't know how to be caring to others, and what you do is have them do small acts of respect, have them choose to act that way, and eventually they become those principles. So they're not just somebody who's trying to be respectful. Over time, they become somebody who is respectable. The second one, the second from the bottom one, is that they're challenges. Okay? There's times where our egos say, I don't want to do that. Okay? I just want to be right. Okay? I don't care about doing the right thing. I just want to be right. Okay? And what they do is challenge us to know, put that part aside and come from what's better in us, to act in the way that we want others to, and for us to act in the way that gives us the greatest gifts anyways. And the last one is their guides to our progress. You see, lots of the recovery program is about inventorying and looking at where your relationship is with spiritual principles and doing that year after year. And that's what you're monitoring, just not how you're operating with the world, but you're operating, how am I doing with my relationship with respect, dignity, fairness? And you can see the progress over time. You can see yourself change and become more and more of that principle, leaving more ego behind. Here's what I want us to think of. This way of looking at it, we take our biological impulses, the energies from them, from the fear, the shame, and what it does is become a force that just goes out. And what happens here is there's nothing to stop it. So this force just can roll over other people in that way, and this is usually what happens during addiction. But if you look at this aspect, what we do is take these biological impulses, these energies, and we filter them through our value system. Okay? And when we do that, what happens is it's like we mix that energy with spiritual principles, and when we do that, it takes on a different form, that transformation we talked of. So it's not just an energy anymore, but it's an energy working, propelling these values into a new life. And the deeper our relationship with our values, the more and more effectively what happens is that we can use this energy to cut through our problems and to be able to create different things in that way. I want us to think of this. This is how this works in a very simple way. This is the part to get. It's very simple to get. Is that what happens is we take our principles and what we do is we turn them into behaviors. And that's something to get, that it's not just knowing them, but turning into behaviors. I use the example that when I went to treatment, I wasn't a very nice guy, okay? I was a mean person. I threatened my family. I did horrible things to people, and I didn't know much about respect, okay? And when I went there, the counselor said to me, what we want you to do is do small acts of respect. We want you to say good morning to people, okay? Just do that. We want you, if you see somebody needs some coffee, you go say, can I get you some coffee? You do things like that. If you have a friend who needs some help moving and you've got some extra time on your hands, say, geez, do you mind if I help you? Gives you something to do, and it also is just a respectful act to do. So they taught me the behaviors of that, and then if you look at doing those behaviors over time, what happens is we learn to become skillful at it. So not only in that way do you know about the principle of respect, but you've learned the behaviors of it, and over time, by repeatedly doing it over and over, you become skillful at it, so that you can walk through the world in a respectful way. And I remember that happening, is that I just remember waking up one morning and going, my God, I'm respectable again, okay? You know, and it's like, then I got scared. It's like, because then you kind of go to yourself, oh, I'm going to have to keep doing this, okay? You know, and you want to kind of back up a little bit, you know. Maybe I can just play at it again. But no, it drives you on. You want more of it in that way. That before you used to want more chemicals, now what you want is more relationship. You want more connections. You want to be and feel comfortable in the world again. And that's really what we're trying to do with families and with individuals. And what we're talking about with the families, we just do that in a collective sense, where we help each other be respectful, where we help care for each other, help each other operate from principles, by in a sense not getting into power struggles with each other, but what we do is we get into intimacy struggles. If I act with values, then I challenge my spouse to act with values. Or she acts with values, then she challenges me to act with values. And we help bring out the best in each other instead of bringing out the worst in each other. if that makes sense to you. And this is about all that I have to share with you on the recovery and how addiction affects families and so on like that. So I just would like to take some time and thank you for being here and the time that we spent together. Thank you.